It's a wonderful Friday morning, and you are welcome once again to our Living in the Digital World program series. So, good morning, and good afternoon, and good evening, depending on where in the world you're joining us from. My name is Estella Hildandaman, and I'm the coordinator for American Corner Abuba, and I'll be your moderator for this session. American Spaces provides access to current and reliable information about the United States through book collections, internet access, events, and activities for everyone. In an age where information travels at the speed of light, it's crucial to stay informed about the latest trends that shape the narratives we encounter online. So today we are going to delve into understanding the ever-changing trends of misinformation. And facilitating this session is Mr. Efo Malto. He is a managing director for EKM Communications Consulting, also media coordinator for Institute of Directors Ghana. So Mr. Efo Malto is a public relations enthusiast. He has worked in various technician roles in different organizations. In 2018, he was the personal assistant to the CEO at Echo Mesa Consulting, working from the premium office in Accra. He was also a project executive planning and executing the Touch Bearers Network and the Speakers Bureau Africa. He has a BA in Communication Studies and holds a Master's of Arts in Journalism from the Institute of Journalism. So during the session, your comments, questions, suggestions are all welcome. Put them in the comment box below and they'll be well addressed. Thank you so much for staying with us. And now I'll hand it over to Mr. Efo Malto.
Thank you very much, Estella. Thank you once again to American Spaces, Mobile Web Ghana, and the American Embassy in Ghana. It's always nice to come your way with information that we put together regarding issues of media literacy and the digital space. This morning in Ghana and afternoon or evening, depending on where you are viewing this live session from, we want to discuss the trend. So as media information advocates or as practitioners in the space, we need to understand what events, what situations, what incidences, what factors would lead to the dissemination, the creation and dissemination of disinformation and misinformation, so that we can better prepare for it. So in this session, that is all that we are going to do. But Estella, we really need to update my profile because Touch Bearers Network was years ago. Recently, I've been working with Justice Bedu Consulting, where we do media, editorials, and documentaries. So I've been working on a lot of documentaries lately. Just recently, I've also got the opportunity to teach as a lecturer at the GH Media Schools. So the profile has grown from when it used to be, but I will just have to do due diligence and update you with the newest profile that we have. And so now, ladies and gentlemen, let's get into the discussion. As Estella mentioned, if you have any questions or contributions to the discussions, if you're following and you are interested in anything, or you have some facts to support or to counter something that I say, or you have some example to support or to counter something that I say, or you have a question that you need clarification on, make sure to simply put that in the comment section, and I'm sure that Estella and the technical team will reach out to you and will read out whatever your comments are for us. And so our topic for discussion is trends and potential sources of misinformation in 2024, zeroing in on the rising threat of disinformation and misinformation. The truth is that a lot has happened. A lot happened in 2023. So much happened in the space of misinformation and disinformation. But I know that much of the world began to take misinformation, disinformation more seriously when we got into 2020 and COVID ravaged the world and we were all put on lockdown, and we began to appreciate the importance of information in our lives. And that is when globally, we began to, as individuals, appreciate the importance of information and the threat of misinformation and disinformation. And since then, a lot has happened. In this session, what I try to do is to look at what is happening in various spaces: economy, geopolitics, digital creations or digital innovations and inventions, put all of these together and try to tease out what I believe are the potential trends and sources of misinformation for 2024, things we should look at so that we can better strategize and craft communication messaging against misinformation, so that we can better create programming that will help or educate people about misinformation and disinformation, so that we can better put together programs that will even arm misinformation and disinformation advocates and activists to do their work more diligently and more effectively. So, like I always do, before we delve in, I want you to think about this. Consider this for just a moment, right? Consider the power of AI and compare that to the power of or the event of elections in 2024. Now, here's the thing. AI has grown rapidly since 2022. And in 2024, it's been predicted as the year with the most number of elections worldwide. Platforms and researchers are counting about 50 countries the world over who are going to have elections in 2024. And I'm thinking, what is going to be the relationship between the rapid growth of artificial intelligence and the incident or the event of elections all over the world? An interesting thing that I want you to think about as we go through the discussion. In this discussion, we will be looking at disinformation and misinformation landscape. We will discuss the trends that we should look out for in 2024 in relation to misinformation and disinformation. And then we'll discuss some of the potential false information sources for 2024 that we should look at. So let's start. I mean, I'm not going to define misinformation and disinformation, because my assumption is that for how far we've come, most of us pretty much understand what misinformation and disinformation is, right? We understand that disinformation is intentionally created information or messaging to destroy some party or to churn out false information. We also understand that misinformation is information that is shared harmful, but not shared intentionally. But what we want to understand, or what I want us to keep in mind, is the fact that disinformation and misinformation is growing and it's become a growing threat everywhere in the world. There's a global consensus that indicates that disinformation and misinformation will be 2024's top risk. And this prediction is made by the World Economic Forum. They say that when they look at the top 10 risks for the next 2 years and the top 10 risks for the next 10 years, you find that misinformation and disinformation is the #1 risk in the next 2 years. So in 2024, 2025, 2026, misinformation and disinformation will continue to be the #1 risk to the world's economy, according to the World Economic Forum. And even in the next 10 years, if you are projecting into the next 10 years, misinformation is the 5th most dangerous risk to the world's economy. And so it's something that we should look at critically. And experts keep warning us. They keep telling us, we need to arm ourselves. We need to do this. We need to do that, so that we can better stand against the effects or the influences of misinformation and disinformation. And, you know, this is made possible because of the convergence of a number of factors. For one, we've seen a rise in some kind of authoritarianism the world over. Even in declared democracies, we have realized that there's a huge interest in leaders wanting to become authoritarian. That is one factor. Then we've seen that the world's population has grown to more than 8 billion. And we are realizing that much of that 8 billion is youth, and the youth are heavily dependent on social and digital media. That is another reason for this risk of misinformation and disinformation. And of course, there are so many wars happening around us, so many coups, so much conflict that each party wants to churn out some kind of propaganda to make their side of the aisle look better to the public. And so all these put together is leading to a lot of misinformation in the system. And even we have not even discussed the issue of media platforms, especially social media platforms, reducing their interest in warding off misinformation and disinformation, which is also another huge threat. So let's then begin to look at the trends that we should look out for. What should you expect in 2024 in regards misinformation and disinformation? In 2024, the facts show that we will have the rise in authoritarianism globally will keep going up. We will keep seeing a lot of what do you call it, countries try to, leaders of various countries try to stay in power longer than necessary, try to throw the constitutional rule to the dogs, and, you know, simply put, become more authoritarian. Even in democracies, the predictions show that there's going to be this rise in authoritarianism. It's very clear that we have so many parts of the world currently that are not free, that cannot be said to be free. In fact, if you look at the graph on the slide, you realize that only 20.3% of the world's population can be said to live under free governance. Much of the world is only partly free or not free at all. And that is a trend that we should definitely look out for. And we've seen a lot of coups in various parts of the world, more so in Africa, more so in West Africa, where from 2020 till 2023, even up to the end of 2023, we've seen a lot of coups coming up in the West African sub-region, but on the African continent as a whole. So authoritarianism is going to rise. And as authoritarianism rises, we should understand that the interest in managing information, therefore, the interest in churning out information that will only make the government of the day look good, will keep rising. And you see, as of 2021, for instance, the Freedom House reported 16 consecutive years of decline in global freedom. So there's a total of 60 countries in the whole world are suffering from declines in freedom, right? We have about 25 which have improved, but that is nothing compared to the 60 countries that are declining. So it's a huge issue that we should be looking out for. As it stands, only about 20% of the world, as I mentioned earlier on, live in free countries. Another trend that we should be looking out for in regards to misinformation, disinformation, is the deep distrust in institutions because of the tendency for authoritarianism, or for managing information, for churning out only information that makes the government of the day or the business of the day look good. There is a lot of distrust among citizens of the world from information that these institutions produce. And that is a huge problem, because if citizens cannot trust the information that they get from the people who are supposed to give us credible, factual information, then it means that citizens will try to either churn out their own information or try to disbelieve every information that comes to them, including fact-checked information, because we know that in some countries in the world, the state has established institutions that are checking facts and churning out fact-checked information. And so if we have citizens distrusting those institutions, it means they will also distrust the fact-checked information that is coming, and that is dangerous, right? The 2024 Edelman Trust Barometer that measures trust in institutions globally. In 2024, what they measured was innovation. They believed that innovation is linked directly with development, as development is directly linked with credible information. And so they measured people's trust in innovation, and they realized that there is a paradox at the heart of society where there's rapid innovation, which offers promise for a new era of prosperity, but instead, there are also risks that exacerbate trust issues, which is leading to further societal instability and political polarization. And this is dangerous, guys, because if we're having political polarization as a result of distrust in the institutions that churn out innovation, that is a big problem. And that is something that misinformation and disinformation advocates and activists should look out for. You see, and it's more serious because in a year that we have half the world's population going to the polls, we really, really need to look at trust in innovation, because we know that some countries are going to employ innovative means of voting. And so if people don't trust these innovations and they don't trust the institutions that churn out the innovation, they are not going to trust the result of the votes that these innovations facilitate. So it's a huge problem that we should be looking out for. The other trend that we should be looking out for, sorry, is social media becoming more video oriented. TikTok is having a huge ride right now. TikTok is one of the most used. In fact, according to Kepios Foundation, which is a huge research firm in the area of media information, media literacy, digital, and all of that, TikTok has the largest usage the world over, right? More than 300 million users so far. So TikTok is making huge gains, and researchers are predicting that TikTok's gains is as a result of it being video oriented. And we've seen since TikTok arrived on the scene, most of the social media platforms that existed before have adopted the vertical or portrait video formats, right? And I've incorporated these into their already existing platform. So it tells you a lot of videos are going to come out in 2024. Surveys have shown that much of the global population that is online prefers short video content to any other kind of content. So we need to really look into that space. And of course, we have issues of Instagram, Facebook, and the rest all becoming more video oriented than text oriented. When Facebook started, it was really much more text. Even Pinterest is now allowing videos. Even LinkedIn is now heavy on video content. So we really, really need to be looking into that space. And then, of course, we have the trend that I fear the most, which is an attack on advocates, researchers, and journalists. It's becoming a huge deal now, because we've seen, especially since 2020 and in 2023, a lot of attack on people that advocate and churn out fact-checked information, or who advocate against misinformation and disinformation. An example for us to look at is this woman, this researcher, Joanne Donovan. Joanne Donovan is a leading expert from the Harvard University. She said she was actually fired from the university for criticizing Meta or Facebook while the university was promised some money from Facebook in terms of donation from Mark Zuckerberg and all of that. I mean, this is information that is out there, right? My fear is that a lot of this is going to continue, right? Even Kate also has a similar issue where she has also been a subject of smear campaigns against the work that she does. She works with the University of Washington Center for an Informed Public, and she and her group have been churning out a lot of fact-checked information and have been fighting against misinformation. And she's been suffering a lot in terms of smear campaigns, in terms of especially Republicans in the US, but people the world over trying to just make her feel bad or look bad for the work that she does. In fact, some of her works have been said to be against censorship instead of against misinformation and disinformation. And the Reporters Without Borders 2023 World Press Freedom tells us that we should really look into the space of media information literacy, because more media people are suffering, more journalists are being attacked for fact-checking information. So this is a serious issue that we should be looking at. Another trend that is very, very important that we should look at is, of course, the king of the day, the boy of the day. Artificial intelligence is all that everybody is discussing now. And this is going to cause a lot of issues for fight against misinformation in 2024. In fact, as of 2022, AI enter the system, and by 2024, this year, we are looking at having augmented reality and virtual reality come up as almost as high as AI and become as popular as AI, possibly because people now sort of have accepted AI, and therefore, though artificial intelligence, I mean, augmented reality and virtual reality has been in the system for quite a while, people are now more positioned or dispositioned to trust augmented or try augmented reality. Of course, we should also look out for issues of false information or the sources of false information in 2024. So far what we've done is try to look at the trends from 2020, from 2020, 2021, 2022, 2023, up to 2024, the trends that as information mongers or advocates against misinformation and disinformation, we should be looking out for and we should be taking note of. What I want us to do in the next half of the presentation is now to discuss more deeply some of the sources of misinformation and disinformation that we should focus on. At this point, if there are any questions or any contributions, I would like to pause so that we spare a few minutes to take those, and then we can continue. Esala, are there any?
All right, so so we have comments in currently.
Okay.
We have comments. This from Madam Florence Tofa. She's saying it's a pleasure that to be here, right? And then we also have Lucia Studios also passing on some few comments. Yes, but I think that we can just proceed, and then our viewers will drop their questions as we move along. Right, thank you.
All right. Thank you. So now to what is for me the biggest discussion for the morning in Ghana and for the afternoon or evening, depending on where you are joining us from. We really, really need to look at the sources of misinformation and disinformation for 2023. Like I earlier on mentioned, 2024, sorry. Like I earlier on mentioned, 2024 is the biggest election year in history. I mean, the facts are all leading to the same point. Different people, different researchers, different journalists from different parts of the world have said that 2024 is the biggest election year in history, because apparently about 50 countries or more in the world would have elections, and some say 4.1 billion, some say 2 billion people would go to the polls in 2024, and that is huge. So, and elections over the years have proven to be one of the sources of misinformation. And so now that we have a year in which there are going to be more elections, we absolutely should be interested in some of these elections, where they are happening and how they may impact misinformation. Another area or source of misinformation that we should look out for is deepfakes. We're going to see, already I mentioned the trend for AI and AR and VR. So we're going to see a lot more deepfakes impacting misinformation and disinformation in 2024. We are also going to see a lot of misinformation and disinformation come from wars and conflict, or wars and coups all around the world. As we've already seen in March of 2022 and in the greater, I think in almost the whole year of 2023, we've had wars and coups and conflicts churn out misinformation. So let's look at elections. This is a flyer from Statista, which is one of my favorite research platforms that I always go to for my facts and information. They are calling the 2024 year the super election year. And they say that more countries are going in for elections in 2024 than ever in history, right? But the problem is that the percentage of this 2 billion that they project, or people that will go for elections, the percentage of this 2 billion that is free or would have free elections or free and fair elections is just 38%. And that is a source of worry, because if you can't trust that the elections will be free and fair, then you are more gullible to believe information from any other side. And much of that information would be misinformation or disinformation. And the other side is that if people, disinformation creators know that people already have a distrust for the elections, or some elections are already notable for being unfair, then there is more likelihood they will churn out disinformation and misinformation about those elections. So something that we should look out for. Already in January, we've had election in, I think, Taiwan. Yes, we've already had election in Taiwan. We've already also had election in Bangladesh. And if you followed those elections, you would know that there were issues of misinformation that flooded their space. And so their media information advocates were really on the grounds working around the clock to make sure that they cleared those misinformation. We're going to have more elections. Some of the elections we should look out for actually would be the one in the US. The US is the world's largest and most stable democracy, no doubt about that. But in 2020, in fact, from 2016 and then in 2020, we saw a lot of misinformation regarding their elections. And so this year, there is the call that the election in the US should be really looked out for. There is also going to be election in Mexico. India is supposed to be the world's largest in terms of numbers, democratic states. So their election is one to look out for. There are elections in Indonesia. There is elections in Africa, where we have a lot of countries in Africa having elections. A lot of them, even Ghana is going to have an election in 2024. And it's something we should definitely look out for. We've seen a lot of misinformation and disinformation in the past, more so in 2020 than ever. And I am predicting that in 2024, we will see much more misinformation churned out. In 2020, when I was working with Ghana Fact, we saw that both the NDC and the NPP had their own supposed fact check platforms, which were websites that churned out information. And so we're going to see much more of that this year, and much more of the information would potentially not be absolutely. So the thing about these election misinformation is that, except for it, that if it is disinformation, is outright lie. But for the misinformation, sometimes they just mix facts with a little bit of lie, like a lot of lies, but a little bit of fact or truth. And they're trying to put it out there. So it's very difficult to find out whether they are lying just on the surface. So we flag a lot of these election-related political misinformation as misleading. We're going to have a lot of them in 2024. And I mean, much of Europe is also going to have elections. We have about 27 European nations meeting to have elections for the European Parliament. That's another big election that we should definitely look out for. So the prediction is that elections all over the world are going to lead to the churning out of disinformation and misinformation. So as advocates, we really, really need to look at that space. Then the issue of deepfakes. This year, the predictions highly lead to audio deepfakes. We're going to see a lot more of audio. I mean, last year, we remember in 2020, 2021, 2022, we saw these deepfakes about the Pope wearing Balenciaga. We saw deepfakes, pictures of Donald Trump running away from the police. We saw so much, right? In 2024, the prediction is that we should also look at audios, because audios are easier to listen to. Audios are easier for people to carry around. They're even easier to create. Audio deepfakes are easier to create than visual deepfakes. And so we're going to see a lot of them in the space. And we're also going to see a lot of cheap fakes. Cheap fakes are the memes, the political statement that will be twisted or spinned in favor of one color or the other, one state or the other. We're going to see a lot of them. And of course, we can't take generative AI out of the discussion. ChatGPT 4.0 is now battling Google's new AI. And so there's a lot of, even among the artificial intelligence and machine learning space, there's a lot of competition to outdo each other. And that competition to outdo each other is going to give a lot of autonomy to the user to create their own information without any barrier, without any moderation. And that is dangerous for misinformation, disinformation, for our economy. Then we look at wars and coups, or wars and conflicts. Of course, the Israel-Hamas war has created a lot of misinformation, especially on Twitter, right? by the end of this year, people might not even trust anything they see, to be honest with you, because, or even anything they hear, like I said about the audio deepfakes, right? And so it's really dangerous, because on Twitter, if you really follow the Israel-Hamas conflict, on Twitter, you would see people from various sides of the aisle put out various information that later is flagged as false or misleading. And you know, what is sad about our situation is that before, fact-checked information does not travel as fast as and as wide as misinformation or disinformation travels. So it's really something that we should look out for in all the conflicts. Of course, we've seen all the coups in Africa, especially Mali, Guinea, Niger, Sudan, Burkina Faso, Gabon. Lately, we've had some 3 countries who were part of the ECOWAS have now opted out of the ECOWAS. There's a ton of misinformation about what is going on. People are saying different things about what the impact is going to be. People are turning out their own opinions in the name of fact. And that is something we should look out for. And yeah, Russia-Ukraine war is not going anywhere anytime soon. It's still on the horizon. We should look at it. So these are, for me, the 3 areas of sources of misinformation that we should look at in 2024. Elections, huge space. In fact, about 50 to 60% of our attention as media information advocates should be turned on to elections. If we really want to fight misinformation and disinformation in 2024, elections is the place to look at, because that is the source that is most likely to churn out the most damaging misinformation, disinformation. Because if people cannot get quality, credible information about who to vote for and what to vote, how to vote, and all of that, they are going to end up making decisions that will impact the whole world. And so we should really look at those spaces and find out ways to mitigate the impact of the misinformation, disinformation from elections. A bonus source that I want to add is the reduction in moderation efforts by the social media platforms, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, the Meta in general. They are all reducing their interest in moderating the platform. I mean, we see how since Elon Musk took over, we've seen how Twitter has become more dangerous in terms of the kind of information that is churned out. And we've seen how there is incentive to churn out misinformation or parody information, which people may not even know is parody. There's more incentive, because if you have a blue check and you put out information and it goes viral, you get paid for it, and people are just putting out anything that will go viral so they can get paid from it. And it's really a dangerous signal for us. So what is the cost? Of course, all of these issues lead to widening partisan divides in the world, polarization, division among people, people dividing themselves into colors, into states, into races. Even racial divisions are going to widen if we do not mitigate the impact of these sources of misinformation. There's also a weakness in public trust. Like I mentioned earlier on, global citizens don't trust the global institutes anymore. So if we don't fight against misinformation, we'll have that weaken further. And then there is the issue of increased harassment for public officials and media, which I'm waiting for the Reporters Without Borders information facts or report on media freedom, press freedom, the world over, so that we can see whether we've deepened further or we've improved year on year. But I think that if we don't fight misinformation, disinformation, especially from elections, deepfakes, and the issue of AIs, we would suffer a lot in terms of harassment of public officials and media. And then, of course, there is the threat to safety and voting rights. And this issue is not even about just the voters. If people don't trust the system that are used to vote, when they go to the polls, they will attack even election officials, electoral commissions, polling agents. This is going to be really serious the world over. We're going to see a lot of conflict at the polling stations, and there's going to be misinformation about who did what, who brandished a gun where, who punched who, where, which police officer did what. There's going to be a lot of misinformation regarding voting and elections. And so there's threats to safety and voting rights. And generally, there's a threat to democracy the world over, looking at the trends that we're seeing. So what can we do? I say, let's revive local news. Let there be more into, if media, information literacy, donor agencies have any funding to give to the NGOs and the CSOs and organizations that are in the space, give it to organizations that are interested in training local news practitioners. Also, the agencies like, of course, Mobile Web and Pen Plus Bytes, Dubawa and the rest should train more local news practitioners, because if we don't train these local news practitioners and we allow our citizens to continue consuming information on the global scale, we will allow them to continue consuming the entire economy. And then we should also look at targeting MIL programs. We should have targeted MIL programs, right? This is to say that MIL programs should not be generally just training people to spot fake news and all of that, but we should target it to areas of elections, areas of deep fakes and cheap fakes, and areas of election, what do you call it, misinformation moderation on social media. We should really do targeted MIL programs instead of the general MIL programs that we've seen in the past. And also, we should have some kind of limited, and I stress on the word limited, legislation for social media, which I have always said this. Yes, I'm not one to say that we should limit or we should censor information or communication or media, but if we don't find a way to manage legislation around social media, we might have a huge problem. Right. Thank you very much. If there are any questions or contributions, I will take them now.
All right. Thank you so much, Mr. Fukokuma. But that has been really, really, really insightful. So we have a lot of questions coming in from our participants, and I'm going to take the first question from Talca Combs. And so he's asking, what are the most promising ways to leverage artificial intelligence in the fight against misinformation?
Could you please just ask that question quickly once again?
Right. So I'll take it again. So what are the most promising ways to leverage artificial intelligence in the fight against misinformation?
Great question. The truth is that the research has leaned towards, one, as advocates, we should be interested in learning about the platforms, the AI platforms, because you cannot fight what you don't know. So if you don't know how the AI platforms that create audio, create video, create pictures, or if you don't know how ChatGPT works, how are you going to then fight against it, right? And the fight is not against ChatGPT. The fight is not against AI softwares or AI platforms. The fight is against their disinterest in incorporating fact-check algorithms into their platforms. All right, so AI is a great tool for life. We all use it, right? So AI is great, but the problem with AI is that most of the time, all that we've seen so far is they are only interested in giving autonomy and independence to the creator, the citizen or the individual to create the information without any recourse to how do we make sure that the information put out. Last year, I had my last session in this September, if you remember, we did a practical session where I showed you how we can use ChatGPT to create a complete news article that is an outright lie. That shouldn't happen. ChatGPT should be able to detect that what I'm putting out is a lie. It's not good info. It's not the right information. But ChatGPT cannot tell me that. So if I want to create this information, I can create a website, create those lies, put them on that website, and it goes. So the first rule for me is learn about the platform. The second rule is to advocate for the platforms to infuse or incorporate fact-check algorithms into their platform, so that, because if we can create machine learning, we can create these amazing platforms. Why is it so difficult to create fact check algorithms to check the platforms. What is it? Not TikTok. I think it's Snapchat, Instagram. They've all inputted some kind of AI into their platforms. So they should also input fact check algorithms into the platforms. Those for me are the best ways. But until they do that, we must learn about these platforms, know their good size, their bad size. Then we can better put out the right information about how to fight against the misinformation they put out.
Right. So I think that that's a really salient point. Taika asked a further question, which I think you have already addressed, but he was asking about what role can AI play in automating the fact-checking process and verifying the authenticity of online content, which you are saying that it should be embedded in these generative
Absolutely.
tools so that people can really have access to the accurate information. And so we know that this would reach out to everyone who is probably involved in making these AI generative tools, and they can inculcate that in that as well. So thank you so much for that response. And so the second question that, or the third question that I have for you is, in terms of, you touched on the journalists who are being attacked, for bringing out some information. So what are the ethical considerations or potential consequences that is associated with combating misinformation?
If you could just ask the question again so I get it clearly.
Okay, so I was asking that you touched on the issues that some journalists have gone through. You cited two examples of people who have gone through such issues. So I'm asking that, are there any ethical considerations in terms of combating misinformation from the part of the media houses in that sense?
Oh, absolutely, because see, when we are putting out misinformation, disinformation fact checks, we should know, first of all, that we are looking for the truth. A trend I have seen in fact checking so far is this. We find a lot of fact check organizations going back to the institutions that already have mentioned are not trusted. So somebody says, what do you say it? Okay, it says an election. This is an example. It's not true, just an illustration. There's an election somewhere in Ghana, and somebody puts on Facebook that the election is somebody has brandished a gun and there's a gunshot, and that is not true. So who do we go to? Fact check organizations, we tend not to behave like journalists. We tend to behave like we are some independent organization. And so instead of going to multiple sources, often you find us go to, say, the EC. When we ask the EC and the EC said there is no gun, we are okay, and we put that out as fact. But if you bear in mind from the trends that we've shown so far, that people already distrust the EC, then as a fact check organization, the EC is not your only source for verifying the information. Therefore, when you put the information out, you are sure that you've contacted even the people that were mentioned to have brandished the gun. Most of the time, what we refuse to do is, if somebody posts online that something is happening somewhere, we fact check. We don't contact the person. The person who put the thing out, let's call the person and ask the person, we saw this on your YouTube or your Facebook. Where did you get it from? How did you come by this? If you talk to people in person, you realize they fumble a lot about what they put out. And there you would know that, no, this information is not even true. When we begin to report fact check information from the perspective of the one who put the information out, it is more likely to be believable than when we continue this trend of using government sources to counteract supposed misinformation, because people don't trust the government source anymore. So the ethics for me is truth. Truth is key, right? And then we have to be mindful of privacy, because the fact that we are fact checking doesn't mean that people's privacy should be thrown to the wind. So we should also be mindful of people's privacy when we are fact checking or putting out fact checked information. Then the other thing that I also think we should do much more, when we are putting out fact check information, we should not repeat the false information, because by doing that, we only popularize the false information. So when you're putting out fact check information, just mention the false information in such a way that you are not repeating it, because some people don't know about the false information until they see a fact check report. Then they go and look for the false information. Then they are tended to, based on their own biases, believe the false information more than the fact check. So when you're putting out fact check, just put out the first thing people should see is false, misleading, lie, whatever judgment you make on that report. And don't put out the rest of the details of the false information before you counter it.
Right, right. So thank you so much for that as well. So still delving into the AI role in misinformation. This is a question from Delight and Cornell. He's asking, do you think misinformation or disinformation can be eradicated or reduced effectively in today's AI and tech world that we find ourselves?
The answer is yes and no. It's a very interesting question. It's a question that in the fact check and MIL academic space, we are like seriously discussing these issues. Can we do away with false information? No, false information has always existed, right? Even in the Bible, if you're a Christian, Judas went and, no, is it not Judas? The Sadducees and the Pharisees, they went and published false information to Pilate about Jesus, which led to Jesus's crucifixion, right? So false information has always existed. And even more so in the AI age, it will be difficult to say we want to eradicate. What we want to do are two things. One, we want to increase media literacy for the average citizen. As we are popularizing these AI tools, so much also must we popularize the fact-checking, the MIL that needs to go with it. So if we have, for instance, 4.1 billion by some people, for some research organization, and 2 billion by other organization of the world's population will vote in 2024. How much of that 2 billion has media information literacy? That's a question we should be asking ourselves, right? So that is the thing we should look out for. The other thing to do also is to insist that these AI platforms, like I mentioned earlier on, are inputting fact-check algorithms into their platforms so that we can use the AI effectively without pushing out a lot of misinformation. If you have an informed and alert populace, and you have a responsible digital innovation citizenry, as in terms of the developers of these platforms, if they are responsible and the citizens that consume the platform are aware and informed and alert, the problem of misinformation is solved, right? That's what I think.
Okay, so I mean, still touching on this important topic, are there any notable case studies or examples of successful interventions, in countering misinformation? I mean, can you share with us in your own personal experience, and then what lessons can we all drive from that?
That's a good question. In 2020, I know that there was something on the African continent. There was something by Ghana Fact together with the International Fact-Checking Network. They put for COVID and for election 2020, they put together a group of fact-check journalists who fact-check a lot of the information. So that is a notable case. I know that in places like Taiwan and Bangladesh, as I mentioned earlier on, the CSOs and fact-check organizations really did a lot in the area. They put together groups of fact-check activists, fact-check organizations. So you see the way you would have social media armies for propaganda's sake, right? We call them in Ghana, we call them the agenda boys, right? This, in the same way, there are countries that have also, organizations that have also invested in creating their own fact-check agenda group, where like people are online and all they are doing is watching, monitoring and putting out counter information to fact check false information that is put out. So those are some of the notable examples that I can give. In America, there is a huge investment in fact check researching and MIL researching. In fact, America has invested a lot of money in that space, and I'm sure, or I'm tempted to believe one of that investment or one of that commitment is what is leading to American Spaces and this kind of discussion that we have on the digital series. So America has fought COVID misinformation, has fought election 2020 misinformation and disinformation. And so they are one of the examples that you can always look up to talk about success stories. Then, of course, there is Ghana. On the African continent, Ghana is the notable democracy. And so we've had issues of misinformation, disinformation, but we've also had a citizenry or a group that has been able to put out fact-checked information, so much so that we have not seen the adverse effects of misinformation as we see in other countries where people go to wars, election results are held for months without announcing them and all of that. We have quick responses to some of these issues because there are quick fact-check reports that counter the misinformation that is out there.
Well, thank you so much, Mr. Fukakumao. So this has been really, really insightful. With sincere gratitude, thank you for sharing all these research and all these insights with us. We really appreciate you. And also for our attentive participants and for your active engagement and thoughtful contributions, we say thank you so much. Also, so we want to introduce you to an amazing online resource that you may find helpful. This is the eLibrary USA. The eLibrary USA, the state-of-the-art digital library with 9 premier electronic databases that include digital newspapers, magazines, journals, videos, and dissertations. So usually this resource is only available in use in person at our American spaces. But with the global pandemic, we are opening up access to this amazing resource. If you are interested, sign up using the link that can be found in the comment section below. And so as we conclude today's session, we urge each of you to carry forward the knowledge gained here to continue questioning, discerning, and verifying information we encounter. Together, we know we can build a more informed society. And also do well to subscribe to our channel. This program was brought to you by the U.S. Embassy Ghana, American Corner Boba in partnership with Mobile Web Ghana. So till we come your way again, do have a happy weekend. Bye.
Mhm.